Hello, you guys. Oh my gosh, we're already at a hype train. Thank you so much for the subscriptions. That started off really fast.
Just sitting here looking at it like, oh, we haven't even started streaming yet, but thanks. Really appreciate you guys, really.
That really is how we do things here. Oh my gosh, I set up subscription sounds. Hang on. And now it's not working. Give me 1 second to try and fix this. I'll turn my music back up just a little bit. How is everyone? Thank you guys so much. Just look at me a second.
It's good to see y'all. We're really excited about tonight's panel. This is something we're both very, very passionate about. And we know it takes up a big bulk of the reason why most of you can't write, because you get stuck in this. This is the part that is the hardest to get out of. That's where I'm at right now too, Village. I ate a little too much, so I have to wait for it to settle a little bit.
Oh my gosh, so many people here. Hello. Hello, hello. I'm gonna test, I'm putting OBS over here for a second, and I'm gonna test a subscription.
Hello, Raven. Good to see you. That's confusing.
I was like, what?
I'll just call you Quill. Hello, Quill. Hello, Don. Hello, Galahad.
How does it do this?
Hello, Toast. Hello, Terma. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all.
Yeah, we're fine. I'm just trying to get this to frickin' work. Oh, Terma, thank you! Look at this hype train! Hey, Lucina, thanks for coming to stop by. Hi, guys.
Man, this is a real bummer. Now I'm getting a 1.5 minute ad.
Well, you better sub to the stream. I think I'm subbed to us on Raven. You've been called Ravion longer than that, cat girl. Hey, Lilas. Hey, Toasty. Hey, Sky. Oh my gosh. Village, Mana, Gala. Ah, you guys are awesome. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Magical behind the scenes. I did get sub badges, so you got cute orange kitties for your sub badges. Hey, Jana / chaotic. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know why my sub isn't working. Like, what am I doing wrong?
It looks exactly as it does.
Yeah. I loaded a sound. I don't know. I just work here too. Oh my god. We already had 8 subs. You guys. We just started.
Technically, we didn't even start anything. We're still fixing things. We just pulled up a picture, and you guys are already amazing. So thank you. Really, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't understand what's wrong, because Sackler, hello, thank you. This is killing me that it's not showing up. It's I'll have to get Sky to help me with this later. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely insane, all of you. Okay, level 3 already.
Jack! Now you have a sub on your Ryok account.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. Oh my god. There are emotes coming for everyone who's subbed. We're in the works. We started on them this week, and they're going to be really cute.
Yeah, they're just going to take a little bit, but they're being worked on as we speak.
Okay, so we will go ahead and pop into this, I think, and get started, since we're a little bit 5:15-ish. Streamer life broken. It wouldn't be a real stream though, like if we didn't have something wrong with it though, right?
Something needs to break every time you start the stream, whether it be sound, video, sub, emotes, it doesn't matter. Something has to break.
Yay, thank you, Sky. Okay. Class is in session. Yes, Uber. So, welcome to our panel on world building. This is, like Rai said, something that's very passionate for both of us. We really, really are passionate about world building. And for those who are new to the channel or to one of our panels, we are Double Blind. We're a husband and wife team that writes the series Everyone's a Cat Girl. I'm Kat. I have been writing forever. I started publishing about 10 years ago. And then I do full-time editing and commission work on the side.
Hello, my name is Rai. I am the other half of Double Blind. I have pretty much the same history she does. I started publishing about 10 years ago, been writing all of my life. And we've been doing Cat Girls for the last 3 years, so welcome in.
If you don't know, we have two budgies that scream at any given time. And the door is closed, but they still scream. So if you hear screeching, they're fine. They're having a great time. Oh, thank you, Village. We're both very slayful.
That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you.
So with world building, there's a very real place called world building hell, and it can be hard to decide either where to start or how to take your world. So we're gonna start with our approach on how we both start writing worlds. Your mileage may vary. There may be things in here that you're like, oh, I'd rather start with that. That's totally fine.
Yeah, to second what she said too, you're gonna find your own methods. That's you'll see that we say that on every one of our panels, that this is basically just how we do things. This is how we prefer to do it. But if you find something that works for you, that's what matters.
Burb cam will come later. I promise. It's on its way. So I found this really interesting that both Rai and I really love to start with the government aspect of our worlds. It's important to determine if there is a government body or a leading body that actually determines the laws in your world and what is morally right and wrong. This will help you figure out kind of where to place your characters and give you a feel on how your countries and nations are going to work.
Yeah, because a great way to figure out what your characters can do is also a great way to figure out what they cannot do. So if there's something like a governmental body or even like a tribe leader, it doesn't matter, as small as it is. If there's a group of people that are dictating how and why you can perform certain actions and whether or not those are punishable, that'll help you figure out where your characters are going.
Toast, thank you so much for the cheer. How are we at level 4 hype train? Like,
I have no idea. This is kind of crazy to me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Toast. Thank you, thank you.
You're awesome. So second up, also, if you guys have any questions, this is very laid back and we love to answer if you have specific questions about the slide or just in general, anything at all. And we are now level 5. Thank you, Toast.
Yeah, we are not on a time limit. Like she said, this is very laid back. So don't feel like you're interrupting or anything like that. If you have a question at any point, feel free to ask and we'll answer it as soon as we're able.
So next up, that kind of goes hand in hand with your government body, are political ideology or how your rules are created. So who is making them? Like, who came up with them? how did you have a group that came together? Did you have one person that did it? Were rules created because they were being broken, etc.?
This is really fun to me because this can actually determine a lot of aspects about like how your world functions, whether it's a certain nation, certain country, a smaller group of people. This can have a huge effect on how they view the world and what their culture looks like.
And then, kind of leading into that, your law enforcement. So, who is handling the laws in your world? What happens if somebody breaks one of those laws? Are there people that are out there watching for these things? Is there a report system?
I actually really like this because this will also help you figure out what bodies of people are important. Whether it's just your ragtag group of mercenaries or rebels or what have you. To kind of like take Star Wars for an example, you have the rebels and you have the Imperials. That's just a small example.
A small example, he says, that spanned out like 10 movies and 14 series.
It feels small to me. It feels small to people who are fans of Star Wars.
Tiny example of Star Wars. Next, you want to figure out if your governments are going to be separate in different nations or countries. So is everything ruled by one body, or is it split up, like each state or each nation has their own thing?
This is actually my favorite part because if you put several different nations on the same continent, you can create a lot of tension with their differing belief systems and their differing governmental systems.
And then you'll want to figure out, do your characters abide by these laws? And by characters, whenever we refer to characters, we usually mean like your main body of characters. This is actually Malaysia on this slide. This is not Nihilania. I can show you art of her later. Yep, it's Malaysia. So if your character is going to abide by the laws, then what does that look like? Or if they break them, what does that look like? Are they on the run from these laws? What happened?
This is also fun because it also helps you figure out who are bounty hunters if you ever decide to do something like that. People who are kind of like working under the table and doing their own brand of justice. So it's a lot of fun to play with this aspect.
So this is one of the very few times where we actually wanted to bring up a few different examples that aren't just cat girls, which I know is like heresy, because we were talking about this last night. So when we were going over this slide, we both figured out that in our other stories, we've always talked about or tried to figure out the governing aspect of it. So for Bound, which is the story I've been working on forever, like it still isn't finished, but one of the main things for me has been trying to figure out exactly what this kingdom does, because my main character works in like the underground market, so I have to figure out what that means for her. Like, what is the underground? What are they selling? Like, how is it different from normal day-to-day life?
On that same note, in my story Drive, there is a group of people called chasers, and what they do is they take jobs from people who the governing body cannot handle. So in order to get that figured out, they have to hire out these mercenaries, basically. So that's why they refer to them like chasers. And they work under a different set of laws.
And even if you're doing a story that's set in something that already exists, so Ophelia I put on here because Ophelia exists in 1956, Cicero, Illinois, but she has to abide by certain laws because they're trying to hide the fact that she's a witch and that there's magic users like within Illinois. So I have to figure out what this looks like between her and the police when she does her investigations, or kind of how that's going to work out between other states. Are there other like groups of magical users that are in different states that they all work together? So even if you're doing like it already modern day exists, it's still good to be familiar with the laws and kind of how you're going to play with them.
Yeah, go ahead, Charma.
Story Village, the rest of it we have cat girls. We were just talking about how cool it was that like both of us started our other stories by figuring out what the government rules looked like.
Yeah, truth be told, and we'll get to it eventually, but you'll find that Cat Girls, there was a significant portion of the story and its beats that we made up on the spot, or that we slowly weaned ourselves into. Whereas Drive and Bound and Ophelia, those three stories, we used a more rigid outline, and we really took the time to figure out, okay, how exactly does this body work? Let's see, would it be better to start the list from the top down or bottom up, like government into how the characters work, or kind of build the character and mold the government around? For me personally, I like working from the top, figuring out, okay, who is the biggest in charge? Who determines what goes into effect, what laws are made, and what rules can be broken? I find that that's a lot easier to figure out, and then think, okay, well, how does that person or that body get help? What if that one person makes a mistake? What if they're tyrannical, you know? And then the rest of it seems to fall into place much easier, because you can be like, okay, well, this is a chairman here, this is like a baron there, they determine like how the laws of the land work here. So I prefer to work top to bottom.
And like you said, it'll totally depend on your preference. Like there, you could find it that it's easier to work from the bottom up for you, because that's just what the story kind of calls for. But it is good to have like the overarching big laws of the world, like, is murder bad, like things like that, where it's going to be things that really determine if your story is going to hinge on it. And thank you, Village. Yeah, we love talking about Cat Girls all day long. I just feel bad because I'm like, you know, other stories exist.
I don't feel so bad, because Cat Girls is what like 99% of the people here familiarize themselves with when it comes to our work. So these were just easier because we had to work with more rigid outlines.
Yeah, and Jack Cicero is a very real place in Illinois. It's very tiny. I had to do a lot of research on like houses in Cicero in 1956, which was fun.
I was amazed with that. All right, next we got geography. I feel like this is probably the second most caught up thing that people get stuck on, because they're like, oh, look at this pretty map I made, and they sit in World Anvil for like 8 hours straight creating all these continents, and when you could have just sat there and wrote, you know, anywhere between 5 to 10,000 words and actually get your story out there. But I understand why people get caught up with this, because I did before. And my suggestion, what I find that worked best for me, and it sounded like it worked best for Kat as well, is that we start with wherever the main characters are starting. So for those of you who read Cat Girls, Matt starts on Knee Island, as most of you know, and he has to work his way up. So starting with wherever the character is usually the easiest part, because you can build from there. It doesn't matter what the rest of the world looks like right now. All that matters at the moment is how the characters view the world around them at the moment.
This is a picture of Knee Island by Crab Red Rooter that's going to be on the postcard for Kickstarter. I'm really excited.
Looking forward to that.
So the next thing is to research similar biomes for ideas on living spaces, ecology, and topography. Knee Island, we actually found, we drew a lot of inspiration from Greece. They have a lot of like those flat roof, square, whitewashed buildings that work really well against the ocean and the mists, because obviously you get a lot of erosion, so you want to make the houses built of something that's going to go up against that. But that'll also give you a better idea of how people are living there and what like their daily life is going to look like and what animals they have around them.
You say that, but some people do get that obsessed about it. They're terrified of messing it up. Let's see what we got next.
So kind of like I was saying before, knowing the above will actually help you create jobs, housing types, and creatures. So jobs is a really big one. With Knee Island, we realized there were going to be a lot of fishermen in New Junonia, that Portia was going to have her job right there. Alchemy was going to be a good thing.
This is a really, really fun part to me because, like she said, it'll help determine the jobs of everybody around there. If they're all sitting there on a peninsula, there's a very good chance that the majority of people are going to be familiar with fishing and swimming and boating, and that's going to determine a lot of how their economy works. So, in the same vein, you could create vast open plains and be like, oh well, a lot of people learned how to take advantage of the land, and so they became farmers, and this will help your world feel a lot more lived in. And this is honestly one of my favorite aspects about creating the world, is figuring out what jobs everybody has.
Next is resources. So does the land that you have give off anything that other countries or nations want? This is something you could figure out later if you want, but it does come with like figuring out kind of the topography and where they are on the map. So for example, sugar, like we've talked about how in Cackrell's on Island is having a sugar crisis because the defiled burnt all of their farms out, and that was like the best place to grow sugar. So it's good to kind of have an idea of like what your area that your character is starting in is known for.
I'll second that and just say don't stress too much about figuring out every tiny little resource. If you have like one or two ideas of what could be used for trade, that's good enough. When I was focusing on writing another story that involves Yukari, for some of you who are familiar with it, I made strawberries, a delicacy somewhere, and that's it. I had no idea where I wanted to go with that, but I thought strawberries would be fun. Little things like that will be perfectly fine, and then you can figure out the bigger details later on.
And then the next important thing to know is how people travel from place to place. Your geography is going to determine this a lot. If you have a lot of sand, you're going to need a thing that goes over sand well, because horses is not it. If you have a lot of water, you're going to need boats. If there's a lot of flat land, then you can use carriages or cars.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I've got nothing to add there.
Cool. So the next step with this is to make a very rough map. Listen to me, rough map. Oh, do you need me to go back, Termit? I can go back. Hang on. Back. Here you go. So you can take a screenshot or... Yeah, no problem. Any questions so far while we're waiting? Terma is very studious. I appreciate that so much. When we were first doing this at cons this year and people started like writing notes down, I'm like, what's happening?
I appreciate that. We got good note takers.
I'm just really, really glad that it can help.
Same. Okay, cool.
Very
We can
cool.
move on.
So yeah, rough map. Like I am talking grab a pen and paper or a napkin or just receipt paper. This does not have to be your end goal. Our first map of Ni was very, very small. You can see that like Cannoli and Kiki and then Espada and Naoko were like over here, and then the ocean was on either side. Like you could walk from one side to the other in a day easily, and that's not how it is anymore.
It's a very tiny place from how we originally conceived it.
So please don't worry that you can't change it. You can always make it bigger. I'd like to get a rough map down so that way, especially when we started talking about where these encounters were, so like where they were fighting the catfish and where they found the minotaurs, I just wanted an idea so when we said we went north or we went south, like where they were on a map. It can honestly, like this little area that you see on now is all of Junonia, and Ni Island blew up like 3 times. We even have a bridge down here to Nyarlathotep, and that's not a thing anymore. So it's okay if it changes.
That was really funny to talk about.
You can also make it in MS Paint with clip art, like I did for my very first book.
I love these.
This is not what got published in the book. I sent this to an artist and had them make like an actual map out of it, but thank you guys. So there were still things that the artist helped me adjust out and that we figured out where they should be in the end. So things on here still changed, even though, and I clipped it off, but like you can kind of see in the bottom where it says islands maybe, and then over here it was like waves, obviously. Like, it's just, can you get a 5x5 poster? No.
Can I get a 5x5 poster?
Up here it's just a lot of fucking mountains.
That wasn't a no.
Look, I'll think about it.
It's a history piece.
The last way to do it is using rice. There are a lot of really awesome tutorials online about how to use rice to make your own map, which is a really cool way to do it because where it falls, you can draw around, and if it pools, you can decide if there are mountains. Yes, Elix, the rice method. This is a great method, and it costs like nothing, and it makes very legitimate looking continents.
What I will say about the rice method, though, real quick, is I can already see what I would do with it. Don't like throw it into the air or figure it out and be like, nope, I don't like that. Nope, I don't like that. Nope, I don't like that. So if you're gonna do that method, commit to what shows up and just play with it. You can always change it later. We're gonna say that a lot in all these panels. You can always change and adjust it later. Just because you put it on paper doesn't mean it's permanent.
Exactly. And you can always add more elevation. You can always add lakes. You can always add rivers. You can always add whatever you need to add. It can be added. This is just a very general direction thing that will help you. So when you're writing the story, if something happens to the west, then you know where the west is. After you have your beautiful MS Paint clip art map, you can figure out your religion.
Okay, so this is a big one. So regardless of what part of the world you start in, you're going to find that every civilization throughout time has had some kind of religious or belief system behind it. Doesn't matter what part of the world you look at, whether it's monotheistic or polytheistic, that's one god versus many gods, or some sort of system where they look up at the stars and they think of the greater vastness of the universe and try to look at that for support and guidance.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like a god. You could even do spirits, like spirits of nature, spirits of like whatever you create. It could be create spirits. I really like Stormlight Archive's Spren system. Like, that's really fascinating. It just, there's a lot of options, but every civilization ever is always looking for something to explain like why we are, why these things are. So
yeah, they're looking for meaning.
And you'll want to figure out if your religion and your government are separate or if they are working together.
This is a really, really fun for me. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, because if anybody is familiar with like Fire Emblem Three Houses, there is a path in the Blue Lions where you can they make mention of like how the story proceeds with the main character of that house versus you proceeding to manage things from the church side of things. Church and state is how I usually like to refer to it, but basically, do the government and the religion work together? Are they in tandem? Are they at odds with one another? Which one has more power? You can use that to develop how characters see the world, what decisions they make, what they find important, and whether or not they're lawful or if they prefer to just follow their whims.
Next, you'll want to find out if there are multiple religious and belief systems and how do they read one another. Thank you so much, King. I would recommend doing this at a very just high level overview and not necessarily getting into the nitty gritty, because again, these are things and details that you can figure out as you write. You might not know a lot of the nuances of your character's beliefs or their system until you're actually putting it to paper.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what she said.
And Ryan mentioned polytheistic versus monotheistic, so if there's one versus many.
Yeah, so I actually have a few clients who I'm working with who prefer one or the other, and they both have their strengths and weaknesses to them. I shouldn't say weaknesses, but there are pros and there are cons. I usually prefer polytheistic because it's easier to create systems within systems. But monotheistic systems also have their strengths in dividing people into yes and no groups, essentially.
See, and I'm the opposite of him, where I would rather monotheistic because that's a lot fewer laws and rules to keep track of in our giant rules document. Especially if you have like religion versus government, because now I've got to follow the government rules versus the religion rules, and if we're getting into polytheism, it gets really, really crazy.
Oh, but you can have fun with that kind of mess.
You can have fun with it, absolutely. I'm just saying what I prefer.
And then let's see. How will religion impact your main characters? You can do this in a soft way, a hard way, whichever you prefer, really. It depends on how important you want to make the religion in the world versus how important it is to the characters. I have read plenty of stories where the religion is more of a backdrop and the characters are kind of him and hawing about it. They could take it one way or the other. And I've seen some where it's front and center. It determines the characters' beliefs. It determines their decisions, what they find to be good and evil, right and wrong. This part is really, really helpful for dividing your characters and creating conflict. That's one of my favorite things about it.
Sorry, no, I think we skipped it. What does ignoring religion mean for a character in your story? So, if it's important to your character, like if it's important to your world, decide what that means for your character. So, for example, I was writing a commission set in like ancient Greece, and the main character was essentially isekai'd there, and he didn't really know any of the gods. So one of the priestesses was like, "Are you an atheist?" Because I had done some research, and apparently atheists were like kicked out of society and not okay at all. So if your main character is not aware of the religion, or if they reject it entirely, what does that mean for them?
Oh no, you're good, Tarma. Thanks for pointing that out. Appreciate that.
I'm just clicking too fast. Sorry. Another good example for ignoring the religion, it doesn't necessarily have to mean ignoring, but rejecting. So, like for cat girls, we have priests and then we have dark priests. And dark priests are those that reject the religion, but they still get powers based on that. Part 4 is technology versus magic.
So this is something I am extremely passionate about. This is probably my favorite part of world building. Technology versus magic is always a really iffy thing for most people. I've heard a lot of authors say, "Oh, if you mix science fiction, if you mix high level technology with magic, you're doing it wrong. Those kinds of stories shouldn't exist." And that is such a narrow-minded way of thinking. I'm gonna be honest about that. You can make technology work with magic perfectly well. The most important rule to remember about technology versus magic is that necessity is the mother of invention. You will find that if you need something, you're going to figure out a way to do it, one way or another. Somebody is. If you have that problem, somebody else also has that problem somewhere, and they're going to problem solve for it.
Yep. So, following up on that, the first thing to figure out is how many magic users are in your world and is it commonplace? That will decide whether your world approaches these problems with magic or with a technological solution.
And there are a lot of ways to do this. So the number of magic users will have a huge effect on how positively and negatively magic is viewed in your world and how common it is to see magic used as a solution to these problems. So, for example, let's say that there's only 1 in 10 births. 10% of the population can use magic. And they use magic to solve most of their problems. Well, what do the other 90% do? The other 90% are probably going to do exactly what we do in real life. They're going to try to figure it out through technology. They're going to use fire, they're going to use electricity, they're going to use copper wiring. They're going to figure out anything that they can to do the same thing that the magic users are doing.
This one is very, very important to me and precious to me. Hey, Trillion, thank you for the raid. You are awesome. My stream
Appreciate you.
Guns with Magic Stone sounds awesome, Village. So, all two of you, I am so appreciative though. So thank you. Thank you for bringing yourselves in. We are currently talking about Worldbuilding 101, and you just joined us for part 4, so you're not too far in. When you are writing anything, I don't care if it's fantasy, real life, nonfiction, you need to research technological advancements in human history. So most civilizations have a similar progression period and priorities. Imagine it if you've ever played Civilization like Civ. Like, you unlocked one thing, which means that you've unlocked a bunch of stuff behind it, and you've unlocked a lot of things on that tree. Oh, I'm glad that emote's working. So, hey Zatara, thank you so much for hanging out. If you have included a working toilet into your fantasy in everybody's house, and you're telling me that people are still dying from the bubonic plague, I'm gonna have a really hard time believing what you're telling me in your world. Like, that should have fixed it. And before we had working toilets, we also had medicine and like penicillin and a lot of antibiotics. So assume if one thing is available, that everything else behind that is also available.
Yeah, to kind of jump on top of that too, you'll find that a lot of civilizations' technological advancements resemble the same kind of advancements that we saw earlier, in that it pretty much follows the same line. They discovered types of explosives. They determined, electricity could work this way. How do we sail the seas? How do we determine where we are in the world? They create the compass. And every civilization was pretty much on a similar track. Some of it just hit it a little sooner than others. So it's important to think, well, if they've got this, then where in human history did we also learn how to incorporate this technology?
Yep, exactly. So just make sure your technology is all along kind of the same tree, and it's in line with one another. So yeah, following up, if one invention exists in that era, assume the others are available. So flushing toilets and antibiotics. It is fine if it's a fantasy world, but you've got to be really careful, especially when you're doing magic versus technology. Because like, if they have guns, then like, why is that more powerful than magic? Like, these kinds of things, you've really got to ask yourself. Like Village said, keeping people alive has similar necessities everywhere, and definitely Terma war is a big factor on technological evolution. So if there was a war, what did that call for? What did that push? The art that we have on this page is actually Iggy, who's a bard in Kakarot World, but we don't really have electricity. She just uses lightning on her guitar to make like her own electric guitar.
Thank you very much, Terma and Village. Those are both very, very good points. Those are huge driving forces for how technology advances.
One's all right.
Determine how powerful magic is in your world. Does it require preparation? Does it have to adhere to a strict set of rules? Well, if any of you have been keeping track with our previous panels regarding magic and how complicated that can be, this can be its own panel on its own, but I'll keep it light. Determining how powerful magic is, how it's viewed, how it's respected, is going to have a huge, huge, huge effect on how technology progresses, even amongst those who don't use magic. One example I can think of that takes it really far and beyond is the Stormlight Archive, and then another one I can think of that does it in the wrong way is Scott Lynch's Gentlemen Bastards. I'm trying to remember the original title. But in the former, Stormlight has such an empowering effect that those who have it are basically gods. And they can fix almost anything. They can fix any wound. They don't have to worry about breathing. They can fly. They can do all kinds of godly things. And you could imagine that kind of defeats the need for a lot of technologies and a lot of certain armies. Ground armies suddenly have virtually no use. And if you want to fight those who are using Stormlight, then you need aerial attacks. You need arrows, you need ballista, you need anything that's going to snipe them out of the air, essentially. So that's another aspect you got to keep in mind. Using Scott Lynch's material as an example, there's a thing called a bonds mage.
Talked about that last time.
Yeah, we talked about that last time. And to make a long story short, bonds mages are so grossly overpowered that they can basically just make up anything that they want and it'll just happen. There doesn't seem to be any sort of rule in place to stop these people, and they can basically just do whatever they want. That is not how I would go about this, because if types of beings like that exist, that means that there must be technologies or associations which are aware of them and can counteract them. They're not just going to sit there and be like, oh, okay, that's fine. Yep, we're just not going to develop anything. We have no idea how we're going to fight you. Yeah, you can just roll over us. So keep that in mind when you're determining your magic system as far as your technology is concerned, like whether or not it requires rituals or whether or not it can cure certain illnesses or blow up entire cities, because that's also going to have an effect on how other people view magic and how they advance their technology.
That was perfect. I'm going to go to the next slide. I have nothing else to say.
I'm very passionate, if you can't tell.
Part 5 is the populace, led by Trivia, because she's super cute. So you'll want to decide if there are different races of people in your world. That includes fantasy races like elves, orcs, dwarves, and then trying to put them in places where they fit the geography, or if they're somewhere where they don't fit the geography, why are they there? Focus again on your main characters. Trivia is Jack's diva. She's beautiful. She's in a place on Yarlathep. But you'll want to kind of decide what your world is made up of. Like, who are the people that are in your cultures?
And then figuring out how intelligent the average person is in the world it kind of plays into the government system a little bit, but it's going to play a huge part in jobs, how the populace views things in general. And you will want to figure out what the education system looks like. Is it something similar to ours, where it's arranged in desks and you go to a very particular time? Or is it more seen as a privilege, like a higher up privilege that only barons and princedoms and the like have access to?
Oh, oops! I kind of hopped. Did you? Okay.
Oh, did you? Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. Did you talk about the intelligence? I was totally.
I did.
Thank you. Anyway, so I kind of said this earlier. Tie your characters in with the geography. So characters who are constantly in the sun are going to have darker skin. Those who live in colder climates will have fairer skin, lighter hair. It's good to fit them in, and that's like a really basic example. You can go really nuts with this for your own fantasy world building. Like, I did a couple of stories a while ago where I created snow elves that had extra fur, like on their ears and arms and legs to keep them warm. You can have gills if they live in watery climates or if they live underwater.
Oh, yeah, you know what? That reminds me of a few things. So that, if any of you have ever played Ion, for example, the race of the Asmodeans they actually have more fur down the back of their body, and they have this long tail that comes out from their spine because of how much colder their environment was. I always thought that was a really neat touch because it shows that as time went on, they grew more fur in order to protect themselves against the cold. Little things like that can really help a world feel more alive, more realistic, because people and races do adjust to their climates and their situations. Like I personally think lizardmen get the short end of the stick in everything. They always seem to get pushed around when I'm just like, okay, yeah, you fight a 6 foot tall, bipedal alligator and you tell me how you feel. And you can do so much with that. Like you could take lizards, you could make them more aquatic by having them live in marshes. You could have them be much stronger, much more denser creatures with darker scales if they lived out in the deserts. And those are just some light examples.
And then back to kind of geography, what kind of jobs do your characters hold? So where they're living, like, are they on the ocean front? Are they fishermen or swashbucklers, like trivia? Are they living in a foresty area? Are they hunters? And actually, that helps a lot to figure out in your geography, and it helps with this, especially when it ties back into everything of like, now you have your different nations and what they're good at and what they can actually like ship to each other. So it all of these tie into one another, which is really helpful.
Yeah, taking a quick example, like on Ichi Island, gigashanks are perfect for traversing the desert. So, and people want to live when they're traversing the desert. So you can make a hefty amount of bells doing that.
Agni's freaking rich. Speaking of Ichi, let's talk about bloodlines and family history. So it's good to know if there are notable families or bloodlines in your world and how they are going to impact your story.
This can be anything as large as entire kingdoms of people with princes and princesses to something as small as tribes, clansmen, and barons.
This also ties into, is there a class or a case system? Like Village was saying, B-Stars is a great example of how race could affect your job and social standing. So does the bloodline affect anything in the class? Does their race affect anything in the class or case system? Is there not, and everybody works together and we're cool? What does it look like?
This is especially fun if you involve a lot of different races and species of characters within the story, because you can use all of their aspects to paint a tale for them, whether it be one is reputed to have lower intelligence, one doesn't believe in gods, one has no order in their governmental system. You can play with this to your heart's content.
Rye brought this one up, and it's a really good point. Are grudges thousands of years old? Is it a very sins of the father kind of society? How are familial wrongs viewed? So you might have one family history that remembers that your great 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 grandfather came over and spat on your uncle's shoes, or they could forgive this easily.
What many people, I fear, don't realize is that a lot of countries and nations hold grudges even against each other or against entire families, whether this be from thousands of years ago to current day. Grudges are a very, very big thing. And they'll say, well, you did this. Remember when your grandfather did this 300 years ago? And they'll hold it against you. And these can be used to impact how families view one another, how governments see one another. It's a very, very powerful storytelling tool.
And then we touched on this a little bit. Do bloodlines have an impact on government or religious bodies in your world? So if you are doing a kingdom, or in Yarly's case, a queendom, is it always the same family line that takes over? Is it family before random and they allow it in a case of something that's like unprecedented? Do you have religious bodies that go through bloodlines and you constantly have somebody in it? Or is it just by like an election body?
This can be another fun way to develop the history a little bit. because you can go all the way back and trace their bloodline to be something like, oh, well, once upon a time there was this tribesman who took control of this group of people, and then it slowly evolved into this huge country, which is now controlled by this kingdom of people.
Karma, don't you collect the little Whataburger things? So you're not even allowed to, like, not hold a grudge against them if you're collecting their flags. So, do these families have any major control of land or resources? So, all of this on this slide, really, again, this is stuff that you can figure out as you write, but it's good to consider for your main cast of characters. So, maybe like your first 3 characters, try and fit this in, because these are things that will play in pretty much immediately if they have lots of land, if they are nobles, if they come from nothing.
Yeah, I would be careful with this one because you can kind of write yourself into a hole a little bit here. So try not to. Because I've done it to myself plenty of times. I usually find that it's better to just start with a select group of people who control land or resources, and you can kind of make up the details as you go along and develop it that way. But that has a huge determination on how powerful that bloodline or family is how much resource they have, how much control they have.
Yes, Terma. And while you're typing, like in Catgirl's sense, Matt is just a normal 20-year-old dude from Washington, so none of this really applies to him. And we didn't really have to start worrying about this until we got to Ichi Island, and Naima was like, I'm taking my fucking island back, so then we had to look at it. And then, obviously, for like how the kingdom works and the queen and who stepped up for the queen, but that was stuff that we figured out like a lot later.
Just further proving the point that you don't have to figure everything as soon as you sit down and write. And in fact, a lot of times that can actually be detrimental to your writing.
Censored by the authorities. I'm waiting on Terma's question before we go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what question he's got.
Everyone bring your favorite drink.
Okay. Rai would know what I mean, but in SWTOR, Alderaan is controlled by multiple families and in charge of land and resources. If it's multiple families, would that not really be something to worry about? It depends on what you mean. I would have to know the context of what you're talking about. But typically speaking, I think actually that just builds more storytelling potential. If you're worried about it controlling your pace of writing or contradicting your writing, well, that's what the editing phase is for. So you can go back and fix all those little pretty details, and people will be convinced that you got it right the first time.
I think he means something to worry about up front. So I would get, basically, if like let's say your story works like that, where your place is controlled by multiple family in charge of land resources, like write down the names of the families that are in charge, the resource they have, and what effect that has on your main character, and then go. Like every other nuance you can figure out as you have those interactions.
That's actually a great idea, because I've done things like that before, where you just like, okay, there's 5 groups. I'm going to give each one of them a name, and they each control this thing, and then I'll just figure out the complexities later.
As long as you know what those families and groups, like the impact that they're going to have on your main character, then you're good. And the impact, what I mean, you can put like negatively affects. He does not feel very happy about this. It doesn't have to be something huge, like one sentence of why this is affecting his life.
That takes me back to when I would get caught up with those sheets that they would hand out for your characters and be like, here's 50 questions for your character, and answer them all. I'm like, I'm going to spend more time answering all these questions than actually developing my character.
I think it's really important to note that Ryan and I have been stuck in world building hell. We have been stuck on Anvil. We have been stuck coming up with character ideas for years. Like, we both have stories that we keep rewriting and rewriting until we like smash them into the wall. And Cat Girls has taught us a lot. So a lot of our experiences that we've picked up with stuff like this has come from 3 years of just constantly writing chapters 3 times a week. So it can take a little bit of an extreme to shift your mindset over to like, it's okay if it's not the first time because I'm going to fix it later. But we get it. Like, we understand where you're at and we understand why it's so freaking hard. We just want to help you like overcome that sooner than later.
Yeah, because I get the mindset. You want to do it right. You just want to do it correctly. You like, it doesn't even have to be perfect. I know some of you are like, oh, it's good enough, and I know that alone can be crippling because I've been there. It's just like, oh, I got all these intricate details that I want to throw into my story, and I really want to make sure it's perfect. And publishing a web serial, like she said, I'm just kind of pantomiming what she said, is that we learned, okay, well, we don't have time for all that. We have to get a chapter out today. We have to do this today. And we really looked forward to the idea of eventually bringing it to paperbacks for that reason, because it's like, well, this is the definitive version, is essentially how we looked at it. And looked at the web serial versions as this was the prototype. So if that helps your mindset a little bit, then great.
Best part is you don't have to publish it 3 times a week. You can keep it to yourself and work on it later. But as long as you are working on it and you've got something going, that's the important part.
Agreed.
With that in mind, we're going to talk about a few things that we made up as we went and that were not decided in advance. So the first one is the importance of sapphires. And this is all 3 of these are going to be for Everyone's a Cat Girl. So sapphires wound up having a huge religious importance in Sorsha's church, and how the girls interact with each other, and it shows like how far a girl got in her quest to being a priest and how dedicated she is to the religion. This didn't happen until I commissioned White Cat for the Sorsha tarot card, and she drew all those beautiful sapphires into her mask. And I'm like, wait, that's a great idea.
Hold on, I'm cooking. I got an idea. What she said basically, and it worked out actually, because it felt like a very natural transition, because even in the original documents, I had developed the system so that the sapphires were actually some of the more powerful jewels because they match the color of Miana, which is usually associated with blue. So when she brought that up to me, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Why don't we incorporate sapphires into the religion of Sorsha? And I have to give her full props for that, because that, if White Cat hadn't have done that, we probably wouldn't have gone with that.
No, Jana, don't hold the story forever on the laptop. Once you're done cooking it, you let other people edit and help you. That's how it works.
I don't think that's a hot take, Lilas, because the Rags to Riches story can work, and it's really, really cool. It's really interesting. It's very fascinating. But those kinds of kingdoms and corporations and higher powers, they got there for a reason. It didn't happen overnight. So there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of powerful people who are in charge, whether it be through assassinations, espionage, power through money and resources. You can't just topple it overnight. So yeah, I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's actually a very valid thing to think.
Service, grace, and urgency. So we knew that we wanted a cat girl maid island, and all of them were going to be in maid outfits. And then we have them get there, and then like Rye creates Celestia, and she goes up and snaps at the girls like this phrase, and I'm like, oh my god, Ryan.
So this is one of the bigger parts that I'm really proud of, is She Island's strict regiment of service, grace, and urgency. Because I was sitting there, so Celestia, Destiny, and Laura were just a few cat girls that I wrote into the situation, just kind of to set up the situation, set up the scene for how the island works. And I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, what are some words that would be helpful for indicating how important their service is on the island? And I'm like, well, you don't want to be too quick because that's sloppy. You want to make sure everything is done gracefully. You want to make sure people are serviced. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I got it. This was made up on the spot. So Celestia's character, how the island works, the phrase they use to basically indoctrinate girls into the school of etiquette, that was all made up on the spot.
So when we first talked about She Island, we had talked about like cat girl maid cafes like Nekopara, and that was honestly our original idea, was that it was going to be full of like cat girl maid cafes. But then we started writing it, and we were like, it feels a little kitschy. So like Ryan was saying, he came up with this very strict regimen of like everyone needs to go through this school of etiquette, and this is like the proper way to be a maid, and we've used that to our advantage for things like nannies and them sending out maids to different like higher end families that can use them. So they have a great place in the world, and that was not planned.
No, not at all. And honestly, this was actually the turning point, I would say. You correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I feel like this was actually the turning point where our world became significantly bigger than we intended.
I 100% agree. Like, She Island was when we stopped looking at it like, haha, and went, no, let's be really serious about this. Like, let's have it be intense and not all that it seems. The last one that I put in, and this is not the only thing that changed. These are just three major things that we made up as we went. So the last one is Laura's elemental friends. And I don't even remember the chapter that came up.
I do.
Here you go.
So I was really excited about Destiny and Laura getting on the boat with Tristan. I really wanted to make sure that they were both very, very distinct, because when you first meet them on the island, they feel like kind of like throwaway characters. You get a little bit of them in throughout the story, but they're mostly just background props. And Destiny's relationship with Tristan evolved to much deeper levels as time went on as well. So with Laura, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, you know what? I really want to make her kind of like the airy, ditzy kind of girl who talks to herself a lot, and everybody thinks she's just a little off kilter. So her elemental friends were, I thought, a really fun idea to incorporate conjurers, because conjurers are supposed to be a type of class that can speak to elements, and they're usually seen as a little psycho, a little weird. So that was made up on the spot. So I'm just sitting there writing her on the boat. Destiny felt like a natural fit. Destiny was really easy to figure out, but Laura, I always had a penchant for those kinds of girls where they're just kind of like, I don't know. So that's kind of how I picture Laura. But like she said, though, that was made up on the spot again. And now everybody knows her for that.
Another big one that's not on here was Ara being such a big character. So
Oh, yes.
Ara and Lynn were supposed to be little nods towards Lynx and her sister Ara. And so we put them in there as like, okay, that's who's going to welcome Matt and co. And then we were trying to devise how to get Tristan out of the school, and came up with an idea. And then I wrote the chapter, and they're dragging her away. And I'm like, oh my God, if Ara sees them like taking Lynn away, she's going to panic. So I had them stop her, and Ryan and I are looking at it and we're like, she's gonna have to get on the boat. Like there's no other way. We've got to get her on the boat or she'll run back and tell Celestia and the whole thing is thrown. So we put Ara on the boat, and suddenly Ara blew up. She became her own thing. Like her whole storyline was not planned.
Yeah, that was funny. I remember that evening pretty fondly. It's just sitting there kind of like, well, she's not just going to leave her sister and be like, okay, these strangers can take her. So she's getting on the boat with them.
She's a great character. Now has like an enamel pin, and like what happened? So you will discover a lot about your world through your character's eyes. You will learn nuances that you didn't know were there. We are still making up Sorcia's decrees as we go. Like there are things that we are still discovering as we write.
And that's totally okay. It doesn't make you less of a writer. And you would be surprised at how many writers do that. There's not a single writer, I would wager, that sits there with an outline and writes it detail for detail. It's like, yep, Perfect. It went exactly as I thought. That's not going to happen. No, I don't believe that.
So Lila, it's funny you should ask, because after Aura became a big character, I was like, oh god, I need sprites for her pro tips, since every time we post chapters, like we have the pro tips at the end. So I figured, since she became a big character, because we were going to have Destiny and Laura with Tristan, like right off the bat, but it didn't happen. So I thought, okay, well, she's a big character, then obviously her sister's gonna have to come along, so I guess Aura and Lynn are gonna be big characters. So I have sprites for Lynn, and then at the end of the She Island arc, we realized, like, oh, Aura can't come with. Like, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't reached it, but we left her on the island, so now I have these Lynn sprites. And they're very cute, and I like them, but, like, I thought she was gonna be much bigger.
They're great. They're fantastic sprites. They're the same kind of sprites that you'll see with any of the other stories. We thought for sure, like, oh, we're gonna throw Lynn with him, and it's gonna be fun, and it just made no sense to do it. So, yeah, we thought she'd be a bigger character, and we ended up sidelining her, honestly.
Aura will have more chapters in the future. We know where it's coming in. There's just other, like, so many things going on. So
yeah, we know what we want to do with her. Yeah, we've got some fun plans for Aura.
Yeah, that was a big one. Like, the whole Lynn, Aura, and then Destiny, Laura swap back, and we're like, what is going on? Like Village said, like, it's such a cool idea though, and it's such a cool feeling when your story is taking you on a ride and you're just hoping that you'll figure it out.
So fun fact, Galahad, actually, when I was designing rogue skills for Aura, I actually thought of Sakya as I was writing some of them, because I'm like, it would be really fun to incorporate daggers and kitchen utensils and figure out, if she could move around a lot quicker than the eye could catch. So it's really funny you say that.
No one else that's really been shelved or saved. Everyone else, we've kind of had a good idea of what to do.
I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head, but honestly, Lynn is probably the one that sits at the top of the list, because she has sprites, and we had things planned for her, and it just didn't make any sense to do it that way.
Like, her combat mode is a really cool Shrine Maiden outfit. We were going for different maids and everything, and had this whole design, and it didn't happen. And we will say this every single panel, every time. Your story is awesome. Please, no one has ever written your story like you have. I know that it is a big wide world and it's very scary, but please write your story.
I will second that. Your story is amazing. There is always an audience. If you like it, so that means somebody else will also like it. We're just here to help you make it become the best story it can be.
And are there any questions? And while I'm waiting, I will show you. I actually have art of Aura and Lynn. And
yeah, we do. I'm excited to show you guys. In fact, I don't think we've ever showed them the sprites, have we? For Lynn.
Lynn has come up a couple of times, like once or twice. So this is Aura and Lynn that I got done, like, as soon as we thought we were gonna make them main characters. And I want to say I did a couple of pro tips with Lynn. Let's see if I can find. Terma, you've got the brain. It doesn't matter how they come out. We'll try and decipher them. You have our undivided attention. Hello, Noelle. Thanks for coming by. It's going great. How are you? I know that when I did book 2 and 3, like, was editing and reformatting them, I was trying to find a reason to, like, use Lynn sprites once or twice, and I remember somebody came in the Discord and actually said Lynn was, like, their favorite cat girl, which threw me for a freaking loop. She has, like, 5 lines.
I was gonna say she has, like, 3-4 lines. She's cute, but, she doesn't play an integral role in any of the major plots, really. She's just kind of there.
Hello, Cherno. We appreciate you coming and hanging out.
That would require us to make a roadmap.
What? But what do you mean by roadmap? A roadmap for what exactly?
Hey, don't worry. I love Esmeralda just as much as you do. So I get that.
Oh my god, I can't legitimately find a pro tip with Lynn.
Esmeralda may or may not show up again soon too. So
Wow, that was awfully kind of you.
may or may not.
Yeah, like you'd say it if she didn't.
Well, you can blame the wine for that.
More wine means more answers. Okay, one sec.
No. That's funny. I thought you'd have like the sprite sheet all ready to go somewhere.
I have to dig through my million. There's some Lynn pixels, and she's got all the expressions too. She's got idle, mad. So when we know that we're gonna do like a main character, we get all the expressions for them and everything. So she's got 4 expressions.
She was ready to go. All we had to do was just write her into the story, and we couldn't do that. So here's what you get instead. But this is just another case in point that we thought we were going to do one thing, but it felt more natural for the story to do another. And if you find that is the case with your story, that's perfectly normal. That's perfectly fine. I wouldn't fight against that in a lot of cases. That usually means that your instinct is guiding you on the right path, because that tells you, oh, well, my characters would do this, they would do that.
So for next year, I mean, we're gonna. I don't know if we'd really have a big roadmap. I always have things planned, like constantly. We have the Tempe library that we're gonna do on the 25th, and then we've got Volume 5 coming out, more chapters coming out. We're hoping to finish Volume 6 in the next few weeks. Fingers crossed. Like the story arc, not the book won't be done yet, obviously. We're hitting UwuCon, but then otherwise we've got like the omnibus that we would like to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's hard to come up with a roadmap because a lot of stuff that we do end up coming up with sometimes shows up kind of suddenly. Some of the events that we've shown up to, we might plan like a month in advance, because that's when the signups appear. So it's difficult to give a strict roadmap as far as appearances are concerned, unless it's an actual major convention. That's why we can guarantee UwuCon, essentially. And, what she said, the 25th with the library convention. But other than that, it's hard to say as far as appearances are concerned.
Noelle, what are you writing? Sorry we're on like the last slide of our thing. And thank you so much for the follow. And I'm sorry my Stream Elements is broken. We hit 60 followers, which is awesome.
Lilas, there is one project that she and I have been discussing for the last few months that we kind of want to try releasing alongside Catgirls, but we want to make sure that we have Catgirls on full lock before we actually jump into that, because we don't want Catgirls to suffer for that. We don't want any of our works to suffer because another work is in progress. So we're approaching it with careful consideration. Other than that, we have plenty of other works that we want to work on in the future. So just stay tuned and we'll let you know as it comes to fruition.
So, not to sound like a totally broken record.
No.
Ryan and I, Catgirls is our passion, and we love doing these workshops. We love doing the streams. We love getting things out to you guys, and we adore. Like writing the story and making sure that it is top quality all of the time is our number one priority. But it's not our full time job. Our full time job is still doing commission work, editing work, freelance work on both our ends. So we burn the candle at all ends. Um, Patreon is like the best way to support both of us and help us do more of these projects, because I would love nothing more than for Cat Girls and our personal work to be our full time. So that is my sales pitch. Even a $5 pledge, a $1 pledge, everything helps us. And I think that we do a really good job of getting out artwork, chapters, behind the scenes. You get to vote on the polls. I take people's cats and put them in the book. Like, we're very, very, very focused on making sure that you guys are included in everything that we do.
Basically what she said. Yeah, because our work takes up a considerable amount of our time, and we are very, very, very passionate about Cat Girls, if you couldn't tell. And we can't help but throw ourselves into work like this. We don't have a good enough sort of button when it comes to what we want to write. When we are passionate about something, we throw our entire being into it. So we want to make sure that if we do something else, it doesn't suffer in quality. And that goes for Cat Girls and whatever other projects we do in the future.
Legit, we have an artist that is very, very interested in doing a Cat Girls manga, and that is something that that is my dream, like getting this ported over. It would be very, very slow. Art is expensive, but even if we could like afford 1 page a month, that would be awesome. But again, that's where the money from Patreon goes right now, is into the art for the books, the art for the series, the cover art. Like, very little of it actually goes into like our bills, so we pay our bills with our freelance money. We pay for Mao to do our acrylic pins that I send to you guys. Like, we love giving back to the community where we can, and giving back to artists, and we're very adamant about supporting artists. Plus, like, the audiobooks, that's another thing. Like, we're working very slowly on audiobook for volume 2, and we're a little over halfway there, and that's another thing that takes like a few months worth of Patreon funds to pay off.
It's a process. It's a very long process. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the process, but it's very time consuming.
So, well, I would love to say, like, we have 3 books and 3 stories we want to get to you guys. Like, that is my end goal, is to be able to work more with Ryan, do more stuff together, and get more of our work out there that, like, we've loved forever.
I know she feels the same way as far as a lot of the other ideas that she has, but going to Drive and a couple of the other works that I'm passionate about, a lot of them have so much complexity to them that I'm just not equipped to give it the quality that it deserves at the moment. I would have to trim around somewhere in order to actually do that, and I know she feels the same way about her ideas as well.
Like, just to give you guys an idea, with our recent Kickstarter, like, I just this last week spent $4,000 to get all of the book ready. Like, all of the artwork, all of the cover art, all of the stuff that we need to have ready to go, all the commercial fees. So it's not really a thing where I'm like, yeah, we're rolling in cash. Like, we're doing everything we can because we love you guys. We appreciate you so much, and we always want you to feel like receiving something from us is like an experience. I'm never going to just shove it in a bag and send it. Like, it should be really fun and exciting, and you should enjoy the journey just as much as we do.
Agreed. I don't want to just throw it in an Amazon box and be like, good enough. Here you go.
No, thank you. No, nothing. Just let it beat around. It's fine. Yeah, back on topic of world building. Any other questions for building a world? Anything we talked about? Do you want me to go back to the slides? Go over anything again? Dive deeper in depth? You have a captive audience in both of us right now.
Yep. So feel free to ask any questions you want. If not, then this has been a really nice slide. It's really good to see you all, and thank you so much for the subs, everybody.
How many characters should be the focus? That totally depends on your story. So when we started Cat Girls, we figured out Matt, and then we kind of learned Kiki and Cannoli as we went, especially Kiki. She took us some time to like figure out exactly who she was. For let's see, I don't want to use Bound because it's not out yet, so it's kind of cheating. Um, for Ophelia, I actually struggled for a bit on figuring out the magic system and how it would work in the world, and Rai sat down and helped me with that. Um, and I figured out her stuff, and then the sorceress that helps her, like her best friend, and then like one of the psychic, and we did that. And then Rai can tell you about like Drive.
So, yeah, kind of on the same instance as Bound, but I'll lightly touch on it. Drive follows the perspectives of about 4 or 5 different characters. It derives a lot of inspiration from epic fantasy, with the main character being Ryok, as a lot of you are aware of. There is such a thing as too many characters. I feel like it's kind of a ratio of importance to the plot versus what your word count looks like. And to me, it feels like a good 3 to 5 characters is solid, regardless of the length of your story. So I don't think you can go wrong with that. I would just be more careful and start with smaller amounts of characters first. And if it becomes relevant, like if a character becomes interesting enough to where it's like, oh, you know, this character happens to be in a lot of other characters' lives, maybe it would be interesting seeing things from their perspective, and then play around with that and see how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go, is like start with your main character, and if your main character is in like a quote unquote party, so if it's your main character plus a best friend or a sibling or something, kind of figure out their group dynamic and then go from there and like fit them into the world. So when Matt got to Nyarlia and we started working on Knee Island, we focused on Kiki and Cannoli and their immediate surroundings, which were just the girls that they were hiding Matt away from. And then once he got into the city, that's when we sat down and were like, okay, this tiny island is going to have an apothecary and a blacksmith, and it should have a boat. And that's when we had Espada and Nauka and Portia. So we just started building out gradually instead of like fitting them in first.
Toast asks, how do you feel about endings? I tend to stop reading or watching things for a bit right before then because I don't want them to end. So I actually really like endings. I adore endings very much. I like things ending. I think too much media is caught up with never-ending stories, whether it be One Piece, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or what have you. I think stories hit harder and last longer and live with people longer if you end it. And if you end it in a way that feels natural or organic or has fit the mold according to the breadcrumbs that you have set. An example being Game of Thrones, for example. Most people did not like the last 2 to 3 seasons. And a lot of the writing exemplifies that. It's a series that after they ran out of material to write, they weren't sure how to end it, and they focused too much on trying to surprise people and circumvent expectations rather than tell a cohesive story. For me, I love endings because it tells me the story is complete. The characters have reached their goals, or maybe they haven't, or maybe they've reached some closure. The story is over. And we can come up with our own imaginations and figure out, oh, you know, what happened now? One thing that always kind of tears me apart with Star Wars, for example, is that Return of the Jedi leaves things on a really good note. It leaves things on a positive note. There's closure between Luke and his father. There's a completeness to the story. Everything feels wrapped up. So when the sequel trilogy came out afterwards and it kind of dismantled all of the characters, it was kind of upsetting because it came off to me like it was cynical. And I feel like too many stories risk doing that if they keep going and going and going and going. So if you have a definitive ending in mind, I feel that makes for a much more powerful storytelling device. And as many of you are aware, we know how Catgirls ends. We know exactly how it ends. And that gives me solace because I know where we need to be. I may not know exactly point for point what the beat to beat moments will look like in between, but I know what the end looks like, so it makes it easier to get there.
I feel like ending things well is an art of its own that people don't talk about enough. Having a really solid ending is what's going to last. Like, that is the last impression that you leave your reader, is how you ended your story. So if the ending doesn't feel complete, then have a reason why. Like, let that sit with your reader, but give them a reason, like, why it's not complete, why it ended up that way. But it's important to end things on a note that you are satisfied with, and that, like, you want them to enjoy picking up more of your stuff. You don't want to be the writer that's like, oh yeah, I loved his book up until the last 10 pages and then I hated it. Like, I've read a lot of books where I was enjoying it and then they totally flopped the ending. So sticking the landing is very important.
Agreed. Let's see. How important is having a villain in your story? Magni is the only one that I've seen in Catgirls. Doesn't seem like there's a big villain right now, and I'm not used to that. I don't think having a villain in the story is as important as giving the characters goals. If they have a method to their madness, if there's something that's driving them forward, I feel that's more important. When Matt first comes to the world, he's thinking, oh yeah, Catgirls, harem, yeah, I can't wait. And so, you know, he falls head over heels for them. So that's his main goal, right? Right there, his goal is, I want to see Catgirls. I want to see them in pretty dresses. I want to see how cute they are. And then he gets blasted with reality as to what the situation is. So then he has to come to terms with that. He's like, oh, well, crap, what's my new goal now? Now his new goal is to try and protect the girls. And see, that's the important part, is goals are the driving force behind your characters. Like, what drives them forward? Because that's going to determine their actions, and that can help you determine the story beats.
I want to fight him and say conflict. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't have to be a villain. There needs to be a conflict or an adversary to your character, because if you have a character with goals, that's great, but then you get OP Isekai 214, where he gets to the world and he's going to save everything and fix it in a week, and he did it. Hooray! Like, so that's not super exciting. Your character should face challenges and problems, and it doesn't have to be a villain. It can just be something they're facing. Like, Cannoli's conflict right now is that she's trying to figure out her religion and whether or not she actually believes in it. That's big. Like, that's not a villain. Her villain's herself, really, at the end of that. I also find it interesting that you didn't say that Celestia was a villain.
That is fascinating. That is very, very interesting. But it also is a testament to how characters are interpreted, which is great. That's fantastic. But I'm actually going to second exactly what she said. Like, right next to goals, I think conflict is equally important. And it doesn't even have to be a villain. It just has to be a conflict. Something that is causing the character to not be okay with their circumstances.
How much is too much involvement when it comes to your character and the world around them, like doing every task available or only focusing on a main goal instead of the whole world? You're looking at it like a video game. So we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about incorporating lit RPG and RPG aspects into a story. Here's the thing. If somebody comes up and says, Terma, I need you to go get me milk, and I really need it in like the next hour so I can make it a cake. Like, I'm going to make a cake for my son, whatever. And you decide, yeah, I'm going to play video games for 15 hours. In a game, that's whatever, because time isn't moving. But in real life, you need to do it like within an hour. So your timeline for your character is going to be a lot different than if you were playing a game and like doing all of the side quests versus just focusing on what's happening. So there's no such thing as too much involvement. The thing is what you decide that they're going to get involved in, because time is going to keep moving.
Yeah, them prioritizing what they want to do is going to be hugely important. They can't get everything done, not always, and that's always going to be a fun, way to tell their story as well. It's like, well, I failed in this task, but I successfully did this one.
Like, for example, Matt has wanted to reach second class since like the beginning of the book, but then Kailu's like, no, we need to unite the men and I need you to go get them. And so all of a sudden his plan on leveling up on the island just got totally derailed by him having to go get them, and that's really all he can focus on. And along the way, he's had side adventures, he's had people that he's helped, like having them run to Catania or going to the side city in Ichi. Those are just things that were there along the way that we explored because we were like, well, he would be here. Quest accepted. Get the men. So he's there already. Then obviously he's going to explore around. He's going to go around the cities, meet new characters, and then if we wanted something to happen there, we could. But they're always on kind of a train track, and there's just stops that happen while they're on it. Yeah, you can only do so much with your time, and I think, like, as gamers, I know I'm the same way. When I play a game, I'm gonna go do all the side quests first before I get to the main quest. But in real life, I can't really do that. My day is shot, so now I have to move my main quest to tomorrow.
Thanks for ruining my daughter's birthday.
No breaks, only men. What if we break the men? Is that enough?
The men have been broken already.
Continue. So as much as you want to explore the world. Like, it's really fun to go on a journey with your character, and you're like, well, he's gonna need to sleep in a village, and so you have him go to a village, and now all of a sudden they're running into Zara and Ishani. We weren't really sure how that was gonna go, but that worked out, so that was fun.
Elix says, how about a story with no goal? Well, it depends on to what severity you mean that by. Like, do you mean like a big overarching goal, like this defines my life, or I'm going to the supermarket today?
You said like the life of a Monster Hunter.
Yeah, like the life of a Monster Hunter. Okay. Yeah, that wasn't up when I started answering this question. No main quests, say, but just side quests. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That might actually prove her point further that conflict is a little bit more important than that. And even small moment-to-moment goals like that are pretty nice. Like, even in the story that I'm working on Drive, most of the chasers who work their jobs, they're just doing it to make $1. They don't care. They don't have, a lot of them don't have any bigger goal in mind. It's just like, well, it just pays my bills. Whatever, it's a job.
Yeah, like Toe said, that's slice of life, essentially. So if you're just kind of going there day by day, it's like, there's a million anime about just going to school and making friends. Like, that's the goal, just make some friends at the end of the day and have fun at school. So if you want to do like a continuation of that, and if it's a Monster Hunter and you want to talk about all the different monsters that he's hunting, I mean, there's a huge game series based on that, because that loop is super fun, and you can come up with all kinds of monsters. And I think Primal Hunter, like, that's exactly the plot. I'm not sure what the overarching goal there, but I know he is like hunting monsters. So
yeah, something like that would be really fun and interesting too. You can even make that kind of like a almost National Geographic sort of plot line where somebody is just exploring the world. And they're just like, oh, I just want to meet all the different creatures of the world. And, at the end, he could probably run into a really big creature that maybe nobody else has ever seen. And he documents it in his journal. And something like that, some on the smaller scale and not so world defining,
Like Mana said, make friends and win that tournament is so many plots. Like every Yu-Gi-Oh, every Magic, every...
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, Elix, no! Okay, so basically we said that it's totally fine if there's not an overarching goal, because it's more like slice of life. So it's just kind of day to day what your monster hunter is doing. What monsters are they hunting? What are they doing with the monster parts? Where are they gonna go? Like, is there a bigger monster that they'll eventually fight? It's just kind of, there's a ton of plots, games, books out there where that's it. Yeah, make friends, win the tournament. Yu Yu Hakusho, Digimon.
Yeah, a lot of series do that. That's a really easy way to add more characters to the plot and give everybody kind of an overarching goal. I like that. It's a fun way to build more character. Cool. Do we have any other questions? We're gonna start wrapping up. Well, you wish you had more questions. All right, cool. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed this panel term, and I hope the rest of you did as well. So we will go ahead and wrap up then, if that's the case. This has actually been, I think, my favorite panel so far. I've had a lot of fun with this one.
If you have any questions, as always, we are always in the Discord and the writing chat. You can always ask there, and we will answer as we can. And we would love to hear what other panels you'd like us to talk about and go over, and what we can help you guys with, because these are a lot of fun and we're happy to help. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all the subs. I'm sorry my stream elements broke. I will figure that out next time.
Take it easy, guys. Have a good one.
We will see you soon.